It's a hearty welcome to another edition of the program Familiarize with the Law, coming to you from Star Television, where we broadcast from Media One Center, 3 Mama Street, Brookfields in Freetown. My name is Abdul Rahman Kamara. A team of experts from the British Geological Survey were recently in Sierra Leone to train staff of the Directorate of the Sierra Leone Geological Survey and conducted an effective mapping exercise within the Loco Hills, which falls under AMR Gold's licensed concession in Bombali District, northern Sierra Leone. The mapping exercise was carried out simultaneously with 6 Sierra Leonean geologists from the Directorate of Geological Survey of the National Mineral Agency in collaboration with AMR Gold team of geologists. The purpose of the research at the Loco Hills was to understudy the complex geological formation on AMR Gold's property, especially the pegmatite-hosted tantalites, columbites, lithium, and rare earths elements. In a bid to use AMR Gold's exploration company as a practical case study in conducting a value-loaded research due to the company's internationally accredited design exploration work plan, looking at the operations of AMR Gold, a reputable gold mining company in Africa with a well-designed exploration plan on rare earth. The two students are my guests in the studio. Andrew Thomas Nisbet, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you very much.
Oscar William Shipley.
Hi.
Great. Also in the studio is Adrian Fisher, a practicing barrister in the United Kingdom. Good and wonderful having you in the studio.
Thank you very much.
Today we going to segment the program. In my initial introduction, we're going to segment the program. I'm going to talk to the two folks here in the studio, then we'll come to you to talk about domestic violence. If we can steal time off to just look, peruse on the aspect of labor laws and employment procedures in the country. Once more, welcome to the program. Let me go to you, Shipley.
Yeah.
For Africa, it is pretty much unusual to see master's students. As to the youngest you are, 21 and 22, I guess. Am I right?
Yes.
Great. Take us through your life journey that will be inspiring young Sierra Leoneans,
Okay, so
given this queer discipline, geology.
so we both completed our undergraduate course in geology at the University of Plymouth in the UK, and learned about ore deposit geology and mineral science. Following on from that, we chose to go to the Camborne School of Mines in Cornwall to study mining geology, both at a postgraduate level. And part of the course was the option to take an overseas thesis project. And with the networking events that CSM hold, I contacted two people that I know work for AMR Gold out here, and they explained what they were doing in their operations, and we thought, well, why don't we go to Sierra Leone and see what they're doing and see if we can get some experience and produce a good project for the company.
Perhaps the attendant question there is, why do you choose Sierra Leone in particular to carry out your master's projects?
It's a good question. I mean, neither of us had ever been to Africa previously,
Not at all.
and when the opportunity was there to come to Sierra Leone, we had to jump at the opportunity, as not many other people get these kind of opportunities to go abroad, and especially places such as Sierra Leone, a fantastic country with with great mineral deposits. So it was just a perfect opportunity to come and study geology here.
Okay. The question, when we talk of rare earth elements, how are they useful to nowadays development?
Okay, so one primary use is in the production of renewable energy resources. So they're used in making the magnets in wind turbines in order for them to make energy, which uses rare earth elements like dysprosium and neodymium. However, in AMR Gold licenses, we know there are rare earth elements there, but they're not the primary target because they're not in economic values there. The primary targets there are more focused on the gold, coltan, and tantalum. But still, rare earths are very important, but not necessarily as important in AMR Gold license in local hills.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Let me hold you from that point and bring in Adrian Fisher. Adrian, you've been practicing in the United Kingdom for quite a while. One challenge we seem to be confronting ourselves as a society is the aspect of domestic violence. It depends on who you talk to. It's pretty much on the increase. Whether there are superior policies that could actually mitigate the impact of domestic violence, well, it depends on who, again, you talk to. What is your impression ever since you are in the country about domestic violence? I know you've been talking to people.
Well, there are two issues that one could look at. Firstly, the prevalence of domestic violence is one, particularly in relation to husband and wife, husband and children. If you go to the law courts, many a time you see situations where women in particular go to the courts to complain about their husbands not providing support for them, or even situations as bad as physical assaults on partners and issues like that, and even on children. So it is prevalent, not just in Sierra Leone, but it's a worldwide phenomenon where society, in some instances, doesn't consider domestic violence.
Is it pretty much common even in advanced democracies like the United Kingdom?
Even in the United Kingdom, yes, it is prevalent. But the difference in many other countries is that the laws are adequate enough to deal with instances of domestic violence. Likewise, in Sierra Leone, there is a law that deals with domestic violence. But I was amazed over the past couple of weeks at the amount of ignorance concerning the existence of the Domestic Violence Act 2007. Now, I don't know whether it's because of societal thinking on the issue, or is it a question of people just do not want to get involved with litigation when it comes to domestic violence issues. But in any event, some of what we'll be discussing today is to sensitize the public so they understand that domestic violence is not simply an attack on a victim, it is a crime. It is an offense in law, and there are punishments that are available, and there are procedures that are available to protect victims of domestic violence, which they should actively be pursuing, as opposed to simply discussing these issues at home with family members.
In your view, what do you think were some of the driving factors to this aspect of inhuman treatment?
Well, there are many issues. If you talk to men, some of them would say, well, they lose their tempers because their wife says something that they don't like. Poverty is another issue as well. Some people have 4, 5, 6, 7 kids, and they're not in a position to support all of them. So 1 or 2 of the children would end up suffering because of the lack of or the unavailability of funds insofar as the father is concerned. The breakup of families is another issue. Many a time when a husband and wife has broken up, the bulk of the responsibility going forward for the care of the children is left with the females. And in many instances, if the wife has not been working, then they find it difficult to get the husband to pay what one would term as child support. So these are issues. There are many other factors responsible for that. Some men are just bullies. And then I should also say, before the men folk get upset with me, that it's not just women that suffer from domestic violence. Some men also do suffer from domestic violence. And insofar as men are concerned, many of them are ashamed to come out to say that my wife is beating me up at home, because they do not consider it to be macho enough for them to say, well, my wife is beating me at home. So they prefer to suffer in silence. So there are a lot of issues, but the important factor is that the law must take its course when domestic violence is involved.
Adrian, the issue you seem to be highlighting on the aspect of men could be seen on them experiencing a kind of psychological obsession, in as much as they're going through some horrible experiences in their homes, not as much as when you think women could be given a thorough beating to their husbands, but there are instances when they tend to treat them in such an uncompromising situation that they harbor a kind of hatred. And how to ventilate that could be a challenge. That in itself, I think, is a very big challenge. Psychological obsession.
Well, another issue as well, which is not...
Most often when the husband tends to reminisce on those instances, you find out that it resulted into some kind of altercation at home. I'm sure that's the situation.
Yes, in my time as a magistrate, some of the complaints that I got in the courts were to do with sexual violence. Husbands take the view that it's their right to have sex with their wives, whether the wife wants it or not. And when the wife refuses, this again becomes a trigger for domestic violence, becomes a trigger for beating, because the husband feels that I have a right and I should not be refused at any cost. So again, the question of the law taking its course is one aspect. The other issue is the sensitization of men folk and women folk to understand that domestic violence is a crime, and there are ways of dealing with issues that arise at home. Counseling, for example. Some people, men in particular, would have problems at work. They vent out the frustrations at work on their family at home.
Mm-hmm.
These are other issues that lead to domestic violence. So again, as part of some of the employment issues that we'll be talking about, employers should consider having counseling facilities in their workplace for people who would have issues at work that they feel they need to address. But when people don't have counseling, the obvious thing that they do is resort to violence to try and vent out some of that frustration, which is not fair on the family members that are affected.
Over time, before I come to Nisbet, over time, the intervention of the police through the creation of what they call the family support unit. I don't know whether there are similar structures out there in the United Kingdom where they tend to intercede and compose interpersonal differences between husband and wife, and it could be family members. Do we have shared experience in the United Kingdom by way of resolving conflicts at home?
Well, no. The UK takes a different view. As far as the UK is concerned, domestic violence is a crime. If you are involved in it, you'll be arrested and you'll be prosecuted. There's no question about compromising or talking about it with family members. No, that doesn't arise. With Sierra Leone,
that out of court settlement.
There's nothing like an out of court settlement. If you've assaulted your wife, she calls the police, you'll get arrested, and when you get arrested, you'll be charged. And you'll have to appear before the court, because the court doesn't consider it to be a family issue capable of being resolved. The court simply considers it as a crime, an offense, an assault, which needs to be punished. As to whether the marriage continues after that would be a matter for counseling. As to whether there's a divorce that arises as a result of that, again, it will be a question of mediation or indeed counseling further down the line. But so far as the actual physical act of violence itself is concerned, the courts would intervene to stop it. And equally here, I have to say that the position in Sierra Leone is exactly the same. But practice somehow has evolved to a situation where the police would actively support a victim to have an informal settlement, ignoring the legal provisions that are set out to deal with this issue. So in some instances...
They're grossly undermining the justice system.
Absolutely. So in some instances, I would say, and I hope the police would understand my position on this issue, that it is a question of law. If there's an issue about domestic violence, yes, you can discuss it at a family level or assist them to reach a settlement sometime down the line. But that does not mean that the law should be ignored, because the police have a legal duty to respond promptly to issues of domestic violence. And alas, many a time I've had victims of domestic violence discuss these issues. One of the issues they say is, oh, the police have not taken their complaint seriously enough. And the law is clear on that they have a duty to do so.
It could be on the insistence of the law that it ought to be applicable, and the persistence on those concerned to say, for want of better words, this is my wife, this is my husband, I wouldn't want the matter to be taken to the police for any prosecution. You see, the two parties tend to undermine the very law itself.
Well,
that is established to address short anomalies.
Well, part of the problem could be a victim might well be told, in some instances, allegedly by the police, that if you take him to court and he gets jailed, there'll be nobody to feed the family. Then that stopped the wife from going forward with the complaint. And then in certain instances, the husband will feel that, well, I've got away with it, and you can be rest assured that 6 months down the line, there will be another incident of domestic violence. So the approach ought to be that the case is prosecuted through the courts, an informal settlement can be reached further down the line, and there are provisions in law that would protect that victim from further instances of domestic violence. But if you do not take it through the court process, then there's nothing to stop that perpetrator from continuing acts of domestic violence.
Okay. Let me hold you a little bit. Adrian Fisher, a practicing barrister in United Kingdom. Oscar, what has been your observation during your period of research with AMR Gold and
Okay.
Wilkinson Hills?
Yeah, so I've been attempting to analyse lithium levels throughout the Matanta prospect, which includes Wilkinson Hill and the Kamasortha area to the west. And the company have previously done and produced trenches and pits, which they've assayed themselves with ALS, sending samples to Liberia and then for assay in Ireland. And I'm hoping to sample similar areas to where they've done previous and take those samples back to Camborne School of Mines and use the technical laboratory they have there and use the scanning electron microscope and attempt to analyse the it's what they call the paragenesis of the ore deposit. So working the timings of when different mineral phases were introduced to the deposit and working out what actual minerals are present within said rock and if those minerals can be economic and whether they can be processed.
And why is the study of geology pretty much important?
Well, it's such a large field, kind of a multifaceted field containing areas of chemistry, biology, physics, but the main thing it attempts to do is to understand the subsurface. And what's so important here is to try and understand these mineral deposits and how they form.
Again, most of the job opportunities that are related to your discipline could be seen far away from home.
Mm-hmm.
And adapting to different cultures could be challenging, especially, I don't know, this is the first time coming to Africa?
Yes.
That could be one of the one of the obvious challenges you seem to be facing. Assuming you are done with your master's projects.
Yes.
And you got an employment out of the United Kingdom, let's say Sierra Leone, for instance, or in Uganda. How are you looking forward to a quick adaptation with the African culture?
Well, anyone that picks geology has got to expect to do some sort of travel at some point and enjoys working outside in different environments. And I kind of use this experience to see how I'd feel in kind of a different environment to what I'm used to back in the UK. And the time I've had here has been fantastic. Culturally, it's really, just fantastic here. The landscape, the people, I feel I've settled in very well, and people have been really nice and kind and offered up everything to me. So I would look forward to working in other countries and hope that they would be similar to Sierra Leone. But having had the experience here and how well I've kind of reacted to it, I think I would do well in other countries.
Oscar, the straightforward question I'll put to you is, what is geology?
Okay, so it's a difficult question, simply put. It's the amalgamation of a number of different things. It's analysing what you can physically see on the ground in front of you and what you can walk on. Then analysing smaller structures within there to infer what's happening on a more large scale below the ground. And then also on an even smaller scale is analysing what actually is inside that rock you're stood on and the implications that might have economically with, for instance, oil reserves, with mineral reserves. And its implications are widespread, but not many people realise how important the subject is and how publicly misunderstood when people say, oh, I do geology, or do you just look at rocks? But the things that come from rocks, energy, minerals, oil, they're in everyday life, and I think it's very important for the population of a country to understand geology maybe a little bit more than everyone does. But that's from a global perspective, really, because the same in England, people don't realise what geology is really at all.
So you mean the discipline is not attracted to you?
Yeah, maybe. I think it is attractive in the sense of people enjoy looking at volcanoes and they find earthquakes exciting, but the actual real-world implications of the science are relatively unknown, I think, to the mass populace.
I'm aware of a Sierra Leonean that is a product of the Camborne School of Mines. This is Salim Silla.
Salim
yes.
Silla.
Perhaps I've been thinking about what is pretty much special about Camborne School of Mines.
Ooh, it's it's very difficult to try sum up why the Camborne School of Mines is such an excellent institution. Partly because of its age and heritage, simply as a body of students. It's I think 1800s, extremely old. But also, modern mining, as it would be called, was invented in Cornwall, which is where the Camborne School of Mines is set, and sort of the mentality and the fabric of mining is within the community in that area, and that transcends well into the educational programs presented there. Lecturers that teach there, their dads were miners, their granddads were miners. Everything they do is to do with mining, and that sort of mentality I found has translated well into the students and across the world because of that.
Yeah, I'd just like to add another reason it's such a fantastic institution is the network you become a part of. I mean, we've only been part of Camborne School of Mines for 1 year now, but the amount of connections worldwide, friends, colleagues across the board, and one reason Salim has probably done so well is the amount the connections he's gained from going to an institution like Camborne School of Mines and having these contacts all over the world.
Yeah. And it's very pleasant to see graduates from the Camborne School of Mines, such as Salim and Luke Rogers and Dan Paradise, which are ex-CSMers who work at AMR Gold, letting us come and work for them for a project, so they can pass on the sort of legacy of helping people from Camborne School of Mines and graduates from School of Mines out, and instilling that mentality so we can go on, and if we're in a position in 20 years' time that we can offer a project to other students.
Undertaking a research here in Sierra Leone presupposes that you most of the hand on the Mines and Mineral Act of 2009.
Yes, we have glanced.
You managed to peruse.
We have perused, yes.
Have you seen anything quite relating to the one that you have in United Kingdom?
There are
any points of differentiation? Not
particularly. No, they seem to translate very well, which is good for setting up precedent of Western and sustainable mining within Sierra Leone, because the Mines Act in the UK set out to ensure that any mining that happens there is done so sustainably, and it will not harm the population but improve the economics and community aspects within that. Yeah. And knowing that that sort of precedent is in place within Sierra Leone is very comforting as an outsider to view that any development going forward has to comply with rigorous rules that ensure that the economy and the community of Sierra Leone benefit from whatever mining aspects occur within the country.
It also attracts foreign investment, which is always positive for a country such as Sierra Leone, because if it were to be more difficult to invest here and to mine here, then you wouldn't get this outside foreign investment into the country, and companies such as AMR with their CSR work, working with the community, this would be lost if it wasn't as easy to invest in Sierra Leone. So
quickly, any prospects of a positive result from your research?
Yes, so my research is looking at structural controls of gold mineralisation in AMR's Renongo prospect, and from my research I hope to help AMR understand the structure of the gold deposit and how it appears in the ground, so that this could potentially be compared to new
through its
new
natural
areas.
formation.
Yes.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Let me continue with Adrian Fisher. Adrian, we've been looking at the aspect of this laws that perhaps could address the aspects of domestic violence. The role of the police is key. But again, to a larger extent, one may say understanding the need as to why it shouldn't be applicable in the first place, especially for those men that are seen as bullies, it's quite challenging. If we are to raise awareness, do you think it will start from the home, or it's as a result of ensuring that the police should be positioned themselves to understand in between application of the law with respect to the out-of-court settlement and also the need for the enforcement of specific policies?
Well, I think, firstly,
because someone will be sitting out there and say, this is our culture. We cannot stray off from our culture. If my husband has given me a thorough beating, police officers have visited my home to take my husband along with the kids at home, you will see the onward intervention of the wife, even though she was a victim. So those traditional values, the ethos, seem to be undermining the justice system.
Well, I think you've raised a number of questions there, and a number of issues as well, but I think I'll try and streamline them as best as I can. I think first and foremost, statistics show that many of the partners that women that get killed are killed by their partners. A high proportion of that killed by the partners, the people that are close to them. The involvement of the police, yes, they're there to safeguard life and limb. But I think one crucial issue which for some reason, some unidentified reason, has not been brought forward in the past is that many women do not understand that simply because you report your partner to the police does not mean that eventually he will be sent to jail. The whole idea of a prosecution is to ensure that the victim is protected and that the perpetrator doesn't get away with what he or she has done. In other words, there's no impunity. One of the virtues of reporting incidents of domestic violence is this. The court has a wide range of powers at its disposal that it can use to protect the victim. Many a time when there's a dispute between husband and wife, the husband would stop paying for the children, for example. He might not pay the rent for the family, which means there's a potential there for the family to be homeless. The court has powers to ensure that even though there would be inevitably, in some instances, a separation, that the husband can still continue to pay to keep a roof, so to speak, over the head of the family. So this is where the protection order is important, because it doesn't simply say the husband goes to jail. It says that the victim is going to be protected, the husband is going to be prevented from carrying out further acts of domestic violence, and in the meantime, whilst that is happening, the victim, most importantly, is protected. Now, may I just touch on two issues here? The issue of the protection order is set out in the Act. And I think victims of domestic violence, be they male or female, need to understand that they do not need to go to the police to report incidents of domestic violence. Yes, if your life is at risk and you feel that there's an imminent threat to your life or danger of injury, yes, go to the police. They have that duty to deal with the issue of domestic violence promptly. In other instances where there is no imminent threat to life, what victims should do is approach the courts. Now, the government has brought in legal aid. Means that victims of domestic violence do not need to spend loads of money to get a lawyer to deal with their case.
Adrian, take a mental note from where you stop. Oscar, you know, when the global impression out there, when a country like United Kingdom is mentioned most often, you know what really comes to mind? It's a country where lawyers are trained, not geologists.
Interesting.
Continue.
Yeah, so
just that's aside.
Yes.
victims can go to the legal aid and ask for a lawyer to assist them to apply to the court for a protection order. And even in situations where you cannot get onto legal aid, you can simply go to the Lockout building at Shaka Stevens Street and make an application for what is called a protection order. Now, the beauty of this piece of legislation, which is the 2007 Domestic Violence Act, is that before the court gets to hear any sort of arguments, the court can make what is called an interim protection order. That is a temporary protection order which says even before we hear from the victim, we're going to place an order to say this victim should not suffer any domestic violence whatsoever. Then the court can proceed to hear the case. And those who would think of breaching that order should understand that if they do, they'll get sent to jail. And the offense of domestic violence carries with it imprisonment for a term of 2 years and the maximum and up to 5 million leones as a fine. So it is pretty serious. It is not the kind of issue that one can sweep under the carpet. But notwithstanding the punitive elements of the fine and the imprisonment which it carries with it, the most important thing here is the protection order which protects the victim and their family. And it does not have to be husband and wife, or even if, as we say in our local parlance, tap to me. They also have rights as well under this Domestic Violence Act. And it could also be your landlord. If your landlord is carrying out certain acts which are contrary to the Domestic Violence Act, yes, you can bring your landlord under this legislation as well.
I'm curious to know whether in the United Kingdom there are structures put in place where justice could be seek without going through the legal system. For instance, going to court, like alternative dispute resolution.
Well, insofar
Are those structures
well,
existing in the United Kingdom?
Well, there is the informal counseling and mediation, which people having issues, family, domestic issues, can go to have those issues resolved. But when it gets to a situation where violence is being used, the informal process would only come in at a subsequent date, but the police would intervene in the interim.
So on the aspect of violence could be an invitation for an intervention by the courts.
Well, beatings. I mean,
Beating.
for example, beating your wife, for example, is a crime, and you'd be arrested for it. You know, I mean, having sex with your wife when she says no, you risk having a charge of rape. Because in 1991, the law in England was changed in the famous case of RVR, in which the House of Lords took the view that it is possible for husband to rape his wife. As long as he doesn't have the consent of his wife to have sex with her, that is still rape in law. And the question of whether that lady is his wife or not is irrelevant.
So in this case, a penetration at any degree is rape.
Yes, it is rape. And you don't have a defense to say, well, she's my wife.
Wonderful. Let me come back to you. Mining has been going on in the country, especially when diamonds were discovered in the 30s. And we take a classical example like in Congo, where there has been some deep-seated conflicts over things we refer to as columbites, used for specific good reasons. Manufacturing of weapons, it could be computers and all the rest of it. I'm aware that a large deposit of it is found in the Sierra Leone, where you're undertaking your research. Going back to the United Kingdom, what could be a remarkable feat of your impression that you seem to be undertaking this research? That when you go back and tell colleagues that what we noticed, what we were able to find out in Sierra Leone was quite a remarkable feat for us.
Okay.
It could be long lasting.
So throughout the world, there's areas of geology referred to as greenstone belts, which typically coincide with some of the largest mining operations in the world. Places of Australia, Canada, and further south in the Rift Valley in Africa. And we believe, as well as consultants back in the UK, that in northern Sierra Leone there is a large section of a greenstone belt. And one of the last undiscovered, unexplored, undrilled greenstone belts in the world, which, if AMR's exploration plan goes ahead, which we believe it will, could be some of the largest untapped mineralization in the world, which is incredible as young geologists to be able to be involved in such a global discovery.
How could the success of your research inspire other people out there, not perhaps here, out there to further their research in, well, if not in Sierra Leone, practically in other part of Africa?
Well, obviously we'll go back and we'll write up our research, and hopefully all the research is available for the next year's cohort of students for masters, and perhaps they'll read our work, or they'll through CSM network find that AMR is still out here doing work, and maybe interested to come out here and do their project like we have, and potentially focus their careers in working out in West Africa. So from the work we're doing here, hopefully we can inspire a few people back home to come out and follow in our footsteps and continue to work with AMR.
Mm-hmm.
I think the links we now have between CSM and Sierra Leone and AMR are really important.
Yeah, they're definitely getting stronger.
Could the country Sierra Leone stand to benefit given your research outputs by way of your findings?
I think definitely because of the reputation of CSM globally, the technical laboratory there is of world-class standard, and because of this, the findings we produce from there will be of a world-class standard. So the company will directly be able to use all of our research we're producing, and hopefully be able to translate that into some form of progression going forward in relation to that exploration program.
It's very important to say that whilst we're out here, we are making connections with at Foreign Bay College, attending the Institute of Geosciences meetings, and we're doing a presentation there next week.
Yeah.
And these links that we're managing to tie between Camborne School of Mines and Foreign Bay College, hopefully we'll be able to have funds or potentially send equipment and have students come and visit us at Camborne to kind of show them what it's like in the UK.
Exchange programs.
Yes, yeah.
There is these three aspects which people keep referring to. You have alluvial mining, you have alluvial mining, and kimberlites.
Mm-hmm.
Of what difference, these three?
Okay, so kimberlite is a diamond-hosted igneous rock, very characterised in a vertical pipe shape, and it's good if you find one of those in Sierra Leone. I know there's one near Bow, and I think the alluvial diamonds found in Kono hosted were originally from a kimberlite, but they're very difficult to find, and you may have one tiny diamond this big in a ton of rock there, so deducing whether you have diamonds in a kimberlite is very difficult as well. So they're 1 in a million chance to get an economic kimberlite pipe. Whereas alluvial mining is material that has been eroded from a piece of hard rock, transported, then deposited as a clay soil, which often you see artisanal mines exploiting that because it's very easy to process. You can hand process that with pans and sluices.
Yes, the main difference being alluvial, meaning kind of river water body. So there's mining of kind of stream sediments, whereas alluvial, as Thad said, is material kind of compacted and almost turned into rock itself, just under the subsurface, so in kind of a saprolite, as what it's called, material.
What type of materials are you taking along to the United Kingdom as samples?
So the prospect I'm working on, AMR have done some drilling in previous years, and I'm taking samples from those cores, the cores that were recovered from the drilling, and I'm aiming to look at those and look at the mineralisation within those cores, and essentially work out the order of which of the mineralisation.
And I've assessed their previous assays of the geochemistry of around Wilkinson Hill and Kamaswatha and Matanta prospect, and gone to those areas of spikes and anomalies of lithium levels, sampled those and intend on making a thin section to look down the microscope back at Camborne School of Mines and assess the minerals that the lithium's hosted within and whether we can exploit that.
Okay, I'll come back to you before we close this program. Adrian, I'm sure we've dealt with extensively. Ufanta, we're going tomorrow to the United Kingdom?
Yeah.
You're leaving tomorrow for the United Kingdom?
Most likely.
Most likely. Let's take our time off last week. Okay, it wasn't Tuesday when we started talking about this aspect of employment and labor laws, which are grossly affecting workers in various government institutions. The relationship between employees and employers seem to be quite broad. To an extent, people tend to be suffering in silence. Whether there are stronger policies that could better address all of those things, I'm not sure. But there has been persistent disregard for workers in some government institutions. If we are to strengthen our labor laws, where do we need to start?
Well, the starting point obviously would be a question of rights. because many employees do not seem to have any rights in the workplace. People get suspended, people get terminated, dismissed, without any proper procedures having been followed. Just this afternoon, I had discussions with a young man who was ill whilst on duty. He's been off ill for about 6 months. He's not being paid any salaries whatsoever. His family has been suffering. He's come back to work and is asking for payments for the time that he's been off work. And his manager said to him that the problems that he had whilst off work was under the previous administration, and therefore it had nothing to do with him. I mean, these are the sort of practices that are quite wrong, because the employer is still operating, and there's nothing like a lack of continuity or discontinuity insofar as the employment terms of that individual are concerned. And there's no reason why he should not get what is due to him. There are other employees that have also been dismissed on the basis of allegations that have not been investigated in any way, shape or form, and there's not been a shred of evidence pointing to the guilt or otherwise of that individual, yet that individual has been dismissed. There are other issues wherein money goes missing in some financial institutions, no investigation is carried out, but then the employee is being told that that money would be deducted from their wages simply because of the fact that they were working in that particular department at a time when the incident occurred. So some of these issues are issues for which we can only resolve them in situations where there are proper employment rights. In other words, rights that do not allow an employee to be dismissed without a proper investigation being done.
How it's working in the United Kingdom?
Well, in a nutshell, if at the start of an employment, every employee is given their terms and conditions, which sets out how much they get paid, the hours of work, the hours that they're supposed to work, and all the benefits that they get out of that employment. And in the event that something goes wrong in the middle of that employment, there are disciplinary procedures that have to be followed. Now, having spoken to a number of employees in this country, nobody seems to have had of a grievance procedure. So, for example, if you're a female member of staff and your employer is making sexual advances to you, there is no way that employee can seek redress, because there is no grievance procedure which an employee can raise to say this is what my boss is doing to me. Whistleblowing is another issue that is very strong in the UK. If an employee sees that something is going wrong in their office, they are encouraged to go to their senior officers to report what is going on. So some of these protections are protections that are needed for workers in this country. And in particular, I think we had this discussion in the last program in relation to employees' hours of work. Many employees are working 13, 14 hours a day for which they are not being paid. There's a law that allows workers to get a minimum wage. Workers are not even getting, because if you consider the fact that an employee is working, say, 15 hours a day, when you calculate their hourly pay on that basis, they're getting far below the minimum wage. And that minimum wage is not being enforced in any way, shape or form. So the solution that I feel is that government needs to engage the business owners or the business community at large, look at the issues from their point of view, look at the employees' issues from their point of view, and then aim to have legislation in place that will deal with this abuse of workers that's currently going on. In particular, sex discrimination. Many a time, women and men working in the same environment, women will be getting far less pay than the men are getting. All of these issues are issues that need to be tackled. And of course, the question of sexual harassment in the workplace, employers need to take that seriously. Because many a time, women feel that they would not get promotion in their workplace if they do not yield to the advances of their bosses. And there should be mechanisms in place that should allow women folk in particular to be able to go to the authorities and say, I've not been promoted in my job because I've not yielded to the advances of my boss. And redress should be had in those circumstances.
Let me come to the two Brits for your conclusion. Most often people have been talking of rare earth elements. In your introduction, you said they play an essential role in national defense. For instance, let's look at the ability to use night vision goggles, the precision guided weapons, communication equipment, GPS equipment, batteries, and all the rest of it. But in broader aspects, are there any elements under the earth that are preventable from the mining that are deemed quite dangerous?
In the instance of rare earth elements, some minerals are radioactive, which makes them quite difficult to mine, and it makes issues with processing and makes it very expensive to process, which makes them in some cases uneconomic. So in that case, that they would be pointless to mine out.
Example?
Processing plutonium and uranium.
Yeah.
Uranium ore is a classic. It's difficult to contain. And with regards to rare earth elements, it's not as such that the elements themselves are dangerous. It's the processes of relieving them from their host rocks that, if done incorrectly, can lead to large-scale disasters and toxic pollution because of the chemicals used to treat the rocks. Use cyanide leaching, for example, and harsh acids, very strong acids. And if preventative tarpaulin layers and sheets aren't there to collect such like leachate or contaminants, then it can be very bad for the environment. So could be
How much do you know about the Maracana mines in South Africa?
Not that much, unfortunately. What do you know about them?
I don't know. I'm not a geologist.
Yeah.
Conclusively, what will you take back home as a lasting impression during your visits here?
The perception of Sierra Leone is one very different to what I thought it was. I felt safer here than I've ever felt safe in London.
Will it be the warm hospitality?
Very much so, and the warm weather.
Yeah, I think just the media perhaps in the West portray West African countries and countries such as Sierra Leone in a bad light due to recent history such as the Civil War and Ebola, blood diamonds, that kind of thing. So coming here, you naturally...
So the narration has changed?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we'd like to adapt the narration, because I think it's quite a dated sort of view of how Sierra Leone's like. And probably the same aspect throughout West Africa, actually. Yeah,
because on arriving here, naturally you're a little anxious, having what heard from the media back home, and within a number of hours you've settled in.
Relax.
Everyone's been kind, offering the world for us. It's just not what people think back home. So we hope to go home and
dispel some myths.
Yeah, dispel the myths about Sierra Leone.
I hope you guys will find very good enough reason to come back to Sierra Leone.
Yeah, we intend on.
Thank you so much for honouring my invitation to be part of this program.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
Adrian, what could be your closing remarks by way of giving advice to, I would say the police? They have a lot of job to do.
They do, but the protection of victims of domestic violence is an equal priority and should be prioritized as well, because you're saving life and limb. The effort spent in protecting a victim of domestic violence would save considerable resources in investigating a murder down the line. And for that reason, victims of domestic violence need to be protected. In the area of employment, employees need to look at ways and means of having an agreement with the employers as to what rights they have in their employment. Many employees don't even have a contract. They don't even know what their terms and conditions are, other than the employer would say, this is what I pay you at the end of the month. So we need to have a situation where employees can have wage slips, in other words, what you would call pay slip, so they can see exactly how much they're being paid. Because we have situations where people, somebody I spoke to the other day was saying to me that his employer doesn't pay him all his wages at the end of the month. He will pay him in 3 installments over the course of the month. Such practices are unacceptable. If somebody has worked for the entire month, they're entitled to get their pay on a given date at the end of the month, not to get half, and then the remaining half 2 weeks later on. So these are all issues that need to be looked at.
Oscar, curious to know, what's the turnover per year, especially when you talk of the Camborne, is it Camborne School of Mines?
Camborne School of Mines,
Yeah,
yes.
yes. What's the turnover per year of students, graduates?
How many?
Yes.
So in our master's mining program, Mining Geology, there's 37, and about 7 of those are international students,
Yes.
and 30 are British nationals. And then the mining engineering course, which is similar but fundamentally different.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a rivalry. There's about 15 of those.
Yeah.
And then about 60 on the undergraduate course, split between an applied, which is more industry based, and then a straight geology, which is more academic based.
So we're having an interactive session with students from the college?
Yes,
Yes.
we're going on, I think next Thursday.
Yeah, next Thursday we'll be doing presentations with the Institute of Geosciences, which a number of the students are members of, and we've met them previously within our first few days in Sierra Leone. But we hope from our presentation that they'll be able to understand what we've been doing here, and hopefully kind of inspire them to go down the minerals, the minerals and mining route, because there's jobs to be had there, and it's a fantastic career to follow with lots of travel and experiences.
Great. Well, I would encourage you to follow Adrian United Kingdom and see when he has a nice in court. Just want to thank you both. Adrian Fisher, a practicing barista in the United Kingdom, and two geologists from the United Kingdom. I must say, it's wonderful having you guys here in our studio.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic
It's been a
being here.
pleasure.
And this is how I do that. I continue to this edition of the program Familiarize with the Law. Thanks to my guests, thanks to the technical team. I've been the presenter of this program. My name is Abdul Rahman Kamara. Great, guys.
Thank you very much.